Hello, my name is Sibel. Last month, my sister called me and said, 20 people are coming tomorrow. Get the rooms ready. No question, no invitation, just a command. At my newly bought lake house, they brought suitcases, wine, guests I'd never met. They called me the caretaker. They said I was lucky just to have a family. And then, they tried to take the house from under me. Quietly, legally. I've been silent for years. I thought silence kept the peace. But what if it just kept me invisible? What do you do when the people you love treat you like a background extra in your own life? And what happens when you finally say, no more? By the time the last box was in, my back had gone stiff, and my palms were dusted with cardboard grime. Still, I stood in the living room of my lake house, barefoot on the cool wooden floor, and felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Arrival. The place smelled like fresh paint and cedar. The sunlight sliced through the window panes in narrow lines, catching floating dust like gold specks suspended in air. I walked over to the kitchen, put on a kettle, and stood silently while it hissed, the sound echoing in the mostly empty space. My home. My rules. No one else's fingerprints here. After 22 years of compromising, of couch surfing during holidays, while my siblings' families claimed all the spare rooms, I'd finally built something that wasn't a hand-me-down. Every inch of this house was mine. I'd picked the tiles. I'd drawn the layout on napkins in between job sites. I'd fought to afford it, staying late at the firm while the others left early for their kids' dance recitals and football games. And I didn't complain then. I won't start now. The kettle whistled. I poured the water over a chamomile bag and took my mug out to the porch. It creaked under me, but not in an old, tired way, more like it was learning my weight. The lake lay quiet, the surface like glass, mirroring the pines that lined its far edge. I exhaled slowly and thought, this is it. This is peace. Then the phone rang. I let it ring once, twice. By the third, I grabbed it, half expecting a neighbor, maybe someone from the delivery service about the couch delay. Hey, Sibel, came my sister's voice, too chipper to be casual. Isolde never called without an agenda. We'll be there tomorrow morning around 9, 20 people. Shouldn't be a problem, right? Get the rooms ready. I blinked. Wait, what? Family weekend, she said, like it had been on the calendar all year. Everyone's dying to see the lake house. You've got space. Don't stress. Oh, and we'll bring extra towels. I just moved in, I managed to say. My tea had gone still in my hand. Perfect, she said. Then you're all settled. Click. The line went dead. I stood there staring at the phone like it had slapped me. No congratulations. No, do you mind? Just a command disguised as inclusion. I walked back into the kitchen and sat at the island, the phone still in my hand. I didn't cry. That's not my style. I set the mug down and opened my tablet, out of a numb sort of instinct. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe this was just her being dramatic again. I tapped into Facebook. Top of the feed. A photo. The lake house. My house. Taken from the driveway, the angle just perfect enough to look like a real estate brochure. Her caption read, "So excited to host family this weekend at our new lake retreat. Can't wait for everyone to make new memories. It's what family's all about." My name wasn't mentioned. Comments poured in. You're amazing, Isolde. Such a great family leader. You always make magic happen. I sat there, scrolling, heart drumming steadily like a metronome inside my chest. This house wasn't a backdrop for her social media narrative. It wasn't a stage for her to play the benevolent big sister, once again rescuing the poor, single, unanchored sibling. No, this place was built by my own hands, my sacrifices, my damn mortgage. And now, 20 people, my brother Dorian and his latest girlfriend, my niece Mira, who still thought I lived in hotels, my mother Claudine, who once told me, "You're lucky you don't have a family to worry about." And Isolde, of course, the ringleader of every so-called family effort. I leaned back against the chair and closed my eyes. The silence in the room stretched thin. It wasn't the peaceful kind anymore. It was loaded. I'd played the good sister, the agreeable one. I'd shown up with casseroles no one ate, with gifts no one opened. I'd slept on floors, missed my own vacations to attend birthday parties where my presence was a footnote, and still, I let them walk in and out like I was just part of the setting, like furniture. But not here, not in this house. I opened my eyes and stared out the window toward the lake, its surface now shifting slightly in the breeze. My fingers tapped against the ceramic mug. Calm. Breathe. They thought I'd get the rooms ready. They thought I'd clean the bathrooms, wash the sheets, set the table like some unpaid Airbnb host. They were wrong. This wasn't about being petty. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about finally choosing not to be erased. I stood up, rinsed out the tea mug, and wiped the counter clean. Then I grabbed my notebook. If they wanted a weekend at the lake, they were going to get it. But not the way they expected, because I had a surprise, too. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of nerves. I'd moved past that. It was something else, like the walls of the house were absorbing every unspoken word from that phone call and echoing it back in silence. By the time the sun started rising behind the tree line, I was already dressed, moving quietly from room to room. The sheets were folded military tight. Fresh towels lay neatly on the foot of each bed. Coffee was brewing. I'd arranged muffins on a ceramic tray. Store-bought, nothing homemade. I wasn't hosting, after all. I was preparing. By 9, the gravel driveway trembled with the first wave of tires. Laughter floated through the trees like a song I hadn't asked to hear. Doors opened. Bags hit the porch. Then came the voices, layered, familiar, slightly louder than necessary. I stood at the front window, sipping my coffee, watching my own home transform into a set piece. The first to emerge from the flurry was Claudine, my mother, with a cardigan over her shoulders even in June, sunglasses perched high like she was auditioning for a coastal matriarch movie. Right behind her was Dorian, silent as usual, tugging along a suitcase and balancing his phone on one shoulder. He didn't even look up. Then she appeared. Isolde stepped out of the back of a white SUV like she was stepping onto a red carpet. Hair curled, a white blouse too crisp for travel, sunglasses she didn't remove even as she approached the porch. "There she is," she announced, arms raised. "The girl who made all this happen." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the group. She always played to the crowd. Someone clapped. Another whistled. I stayed still, half shadowed by the kitchen frame. They poured into the house. Coolers dragged across the hardwood. Sandals flung by the door. Voices bounced off every surface. Isolde hugged someone, then started pointing like a commander. "You two take the corner room. Mom and I are upstairs. Dorian can take the pullout." She'd done this before I could even open my mouth. As I turned toward the hallway, a woman I didn't recognize walked toward me. Maybe in her late 40s, dressed like she was coming from a yoga retreat, arms full of bags. "Hi there," she said brightly, pressing a suitcase into my hands. "Would you mind carrying this up to the loft room?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" She smiled, oblivious. "I just figured you're helping out, right?" I stared at her, the weight of the bag still between us. "I'm not staff," I said quietly. Calm, firm. Her eyes widened. She stammered, "Oh, I didn't mean, someone said you were helping." She trailed off, reaching for the bag with fingers that suddenly didn't know what to do. I handed it back without a word. Turned and walked down the hall, my pulse thudding in my ears like someone had knocked against the beams of the house itself. In the dining room, laughter erupted. I followed the sound, more out of instinct than interest. Isolde stood at the table, surrounded by half-opened boxes of decorations, centerpieces, labeled napkins, even candles. On the table lay a stack of glossy invitations. I picked one up. Hosted by Isolde Greenwood, Family Lake Weekend. No mention of me, not a footnote, not even a passive "at Sibel's home." Just her name, her show. I turned the card over. Nothing, no detail out of place. The font was classic, elegant. It looked expensive. She'd printed and sent these out, probably weeks ago, before she even called, before I'd even moved in. Behind me, I heard Claudine's voice. "You look pale, dear. Are you tired?" I turned slowly. "Did you know about this?" She gave me that smile. the one she always used when she didn't want to get involved. Your sister's good at planning. She means well. Don't take it personally. Of course not. It wasn't personal. Just like every holiday I was told where to sit. Just like every family photo I was nudged to the edge of. Just like every time someone introduced Isolde as the glue and me as the other one. I placed the invitation back on the table. Isolde laughed from the kitchen. She was arranging wine bottles on the counter like she owned the air in the room. I left without saying anything. Upstairs, I opened the drawer of the nightstand and tucked one of the invitations inside. I closed it gently, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for a moment. She'd taken my house and turned it into a backdrop. I'd let it happen before, let her take credit, take space, take applause. But I wasn't going to let her take this. Not this time. That evening, after most of them had gone down to the dock, I walked the property line. The pines swayed in the wind like old sentries. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't bring anything. Just myself. The breeze carried voices from the water, distant enough to ignore. I sat on the swing at the edge of the porch. My hand rested on the armrest. Inside it, the paper invitation waited. I wasn't going to confront her today. But the difference this time was simple. I wasn't going to swallow it either. Because silence isn't the same thing as surrender. After I tucked the folded invitation back into the drawer, I stayed sitting on the edge of the bed. The house was alive with voices downstairs, forks clinking against ceramic plates, someone opening a bottle of wine too close to laughter. It was a kind of noise that once used to sting me. Now it just felt distant. I had cooked dinner. I didn't want to, but I did. Not because I owed them hospitality. I didn't. But because it was easier than watching Isolde choose a caterer and announce it on Facebook like she'd planned the whole thing. So I simmered pasta, grilled salmon, and set out bowls of salad and warm bread. Everyone ate. None asked who prepared it. They just assumed it had magically appeared. The way things always seemed to when I was involved. Isolde stood to give a toast midway through the meal. She raised her wine glass and looked around like she was on stage. To family, she said, and to this beautiful home that we are so lucky to enjoy together. It's been such a long time since we've all been in one place. Applause. Even my mother clapped. Dorian nodded and sipped his drink without a word. No one looked at me. No one mentioned my name. Not once. I stayed seated, smiled faintly, and took another bite of salad. If I'd stood up and yelled, I don't think anyone would have noticed. Later, after the plates were cleared and the noise moved out to the dock, I slipped away upstairs. I needed air. Not the kind you breathe, but the kind that fills space when you're finally alone. I opened the closet in the guest room, the one I had claimed for myself, and reached for a small box tucked behind a stack of folded blankets. Inside were things I didn't look at often. Old ticket stubs, photos, a dried-out corsage from a high school dance. At the bottom, creased and yellowing, was the letter. It had been sealed in a white envelope, never opened. The handwriting was unmistakably his, Jeremy's. He'd been my first love. The kind of love you don't speak about in family gatherings because it was soft, serious, and not meant for light company. I never received that letter. Not back then. I found it by accident a decade later in Isolde's desk drawer, wedged between her travel documents and a birthday card addressed to someone else. She'd kept it, sealed, unread, unspoken. I never asked her why. I never told Jeremy I found it. I just drifted away from him, convinced he'd let me go without a fight. But now, reading his words, I knew the truth. I meant what I said, Sibel. I'll wait. If this job in Chicago works out, I'll come back with a real offer, a ring. But if you don't feel the same, don't reply. I'll understand. He waited. I never replied. And he never knew why. I folded the letter back with careful fingers. My throat tightened. Not from sadness, but from a quiet fury. Not even about the letter anymore. About what it represented. How many times I'd been left in the dark while Isolde shaped the story to suit herself. I heard a soft knock at the door. It opened before I answered. Claudine stepped in, holding a basket of folded laundry like she'd walked straight out of the 1950s. You should come down, she said. Everyone's asking where you went. Are they? I kept my voice even. She set the basket on the bed and started smoothing out the top towel like that was the reason she came. You've always been so sensitive, she said casually. Try not to take things so personally. You know your sister just takes charge, always has. It's not meant to hurt. I didn't answer. I folded a shirt and placed it beside the rest. She just carries more on her shoulders, Claudine went on. Organizing, keeping people together. It's a burden too, you know. I turned to her. So, erasing me is a burden? She paused, not long enough to think, just long enough to dismiss. You always make things sound harsher than they are. It's exhausting sometimes. Then she left, closing the door behind her like she hadn't just thrown sand on an open wound. I sat still for a while. The house, despite all its noise, had moments where everything settled. Like right now. No footsteps, no plates, just distant waves brushing the edge of the dock. I stood and grabbed my jacket. Slipping out through the side door, I walked toward the water. The moon was high. Silver ripples danced across the lake's surface, and the pine trees stood in their usual hush. I thought about the things they didn't remember, like the time I drove Mom to the ER at 2 a.m. and didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to cause panic, or how I paid for Dorian's divorce lawyer's retainer without letting him know it came from me. Or how every Christmas I rearranged travel plans to make sure someone was with Mira, even when no one else offered. They didn't forget. They just never noticed. I walked the length of the deck slowly, each step steady. My breath fogged in front of me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel hollow. I felt ready. This time, there would be no shouting, no grand declarations, just one moment, carefully placed, that no one would forget. The morning after that silent declaration to myself, I woke early, not because I was excited that ship had sailed, but because I knew I needed to be alert. Brunch was supposedly planned, though no one had told me. Still, the sounds of movement downstairs told me everything I needed to know. People were bustling, voices were rising in pitch and volume, and once again, I hadn't been consulted. I brushed my teeth slowly, dressed with intention. Jeans, soft cotton tee, no makeup, and made my way down the stairs. The living room had turned into a campsite. Bags were spilling open on the couches, children's shoes scattered like confetti. I could smell the coffee, but no one had brewed it in my kitchen. They'd brought their own pods. Of course they had. Isolde was perched on the edge of a bar stool, legs crossed, reading aloud from her phone. So we'll head to Bayside Cafe around 10:30, then the boat rental's booked for noon. I figured we could do 2 hours on the water before it gets too hot, she said, not looking up. I'll drive the van. Dorian, you can take Mom and whoever else doesn't want to get sunburned. Claudine chuckled. I'll be in the shade, thank you very much. No one looked at me. No one asked if I was coming. No one asked if I wanted 20 people using my kitchen, my deck, my dock. I moved toward the back hallway and paused just as I reached the den. The door wasn't fully shut, and voices floated through. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but then again, how else was I supposed to learn anything in this house? I think if we move it into a family LLC, Isolde said, her tone casual but clipped, we can manage taxes better. Shared ownership would also look cleaner on paper. She'll come around. She always does, Dorian replied. She's not confrontational. Just throw in some legal terms and she'll get lost. Then came Claudine's voice, motherly and sharp like a knife wrapped in a napkin. She's lucky to have you two looking after her. She wouldn't know what to do with all that responsibility on her own. I leaned back from the door, heart thudding. My hands curled into fists at my sides. They were talking about transferring ownership of my house, my lake house, the one with my name on the deed, my sweat in the floorboards, my money in the mortgage. Lucky to have them. I was a 45-year-old licensed architect who had designed this entire structure from scratch. And yet somehow, I was still the child in the back seat of the family car, being told what radio station to listen to. I stepped outside onto the porch to clear my thoughts. The air was warmer now, soft breezes gliding off the lake, sunlight gleaming on the water like liquid glass. I needed that quiet moment, because inside, everything was brewing. That's when I saw the man from the night before, Trevor, I think his name was, walking toward me, a bouquet of flowers in hand. I just wanted to say, he said, handing it to me with a gentle smile. This place is incredible, really beautiful. You've done something special here. The card was tucked neatly among the stems. For the woman who built something beautiful. I nodded, genuinely touched. Thank you, Trevor. That means more than you know. Before I could say another word, Isolde swooped in from the side, all sunshine and teeth. Oh, these are lovely, she cooed, plucking the bouquet from my hands like it had been offered to her. You shouldn't have. Really? Trevor blinked. But Isolde was already sweeping back inside, flowers in hand. I didn't chase her. An hour later, after everyone left for brunch, I went to the trash can in the kitchen. I knew exactly what I was looking for. There, tucked among napkins and an empty granola bar wrapper, was the card. And the same one I'd read, torn in half. They say small things break a person. That day, it wasn't the LLC talk. It wasn't the exclusion. It wasn't even the lie. It was the casualness of it all. The way she took something meant for me, claimed it, then discarded the only part that made it personal, like I wasn't real, like I was a set piece. I waited until everyone returned, loud and flushed from sun and laughter, tracking sand through the front hallway, talking over each other like they always did. Then, while they were still standing around the kitchen island, I walked in. No drama, no raised voice, just clear eyes and a steady tone. This house is not shared, I said. It's not a write-off, it's not a family holding, it's mine. Legally, financially, emotionally. And I don't appreciate my name being left out of decisions about it. You could have dropped a fork and heard it land. Claudine sniffed. Don't be so possessive, Cybele. We're just talking. Isolde laughed softly. No need to make it a thing. It's just easier when we plan as a group. I wasn't part of that group, I replied. So don't call it we. No one said anything else. I didn't wait for permission to leave the room. I didn't need it. Knew then that they heard me, but they didn't listen, and that would cost them. That afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent behind the pines, the house shifted, not in structure, the walls held firm, the beams were true, but in energy. You could feel it, like a pause between sentences when someone's deciding if it's worth speaking again. They had heard me, sure, but no one wanted to admit it, so instead, they pretended nothing had happened. Breakfast the next morning was quiet, but not calm. No one brought up what I said the day before. Not Isolde, not Claudine, not even Dorian. The whole house was operating under a kind of polite delusion, as if my voice hadn't filled the kitchen, hadn't cut through the noise like a stone in glass. Isolde, ever the conductor of false harmony, smiled more than usual. She poured orange juice like she was hosting a brunch show, complimented everyone's outfits, commented on the weather like it had personally sent her a thank you card. I sat at the far end of the table, eating toast that had gone cold in my hands. I didn't speak unless spoken to, and no one had the courage or the courtesy to try. Trevor, the guest who had brought me flowers days earlier, the ones Isolde had claimed, sat across from me. He gave me a polite nod, but nothing more. I couldn't blame him. People don't like discomfort, and truth always makes things uncomfortable. So, Trevor said, directing his voice to the table at large, but somehow landing it squarely on me. This house, really something. Must be nice to have the time for projects like this. I turned my head slowly, making sure my eyes met his. What do you mean? I asked, though I already knew. He chuckled, lifting his coffee cup. You know, some of us are just juggling a million things. Kids, work, spouses. But hey, when you've got the freedom, why not build a lake house, right? There was a silence, short but sharp. I set my toast down. Busy doesn't always mean building something, I said quietly. Sometimes it just means noise. He blinked, smiled tightly. Right? Of course. Isolde jumped in, quick to save face. Well, we're just grateful to be here. It's been so relaxing. Relaxing, for them, maybe. Later, I wandered into the living room to retrieve a sweater I'd left draped over the back of a chair. Mira, my niece, was sitting on the rug near the window, playing with a deck of cards. She looked up at me, smiling. Aunt Cybele, Mommy says we should always let her be in charge here. She's mom of the house. The words hit me in a way nothing else had. Not the LLC talk, not the intercepted flowers, not even the plan to change the ownership on my deed. This, from the mouth of a child. A child who was simply repeating what she heard at home and believing it. I looked toward the hallway. Isolde was halfway up the stairs, pretending not to have heard. She turned her head slightly and said without missing a beat, "Kids pick up everything, don't they? It's kind of cute." I didn't respond, not to her, not to Mira. I walked out to the back patio, sweater in hand, and took a seat facing the lake. The water was calm, but the air was starting to cool. I could feel it in my bones, not just the shift in weather, but the turn of something deeper. They had no idea what they were waking in me, no idea that I had started taking mental notes of every microaggression, every theft of space, every polite dismissal and sideways compliment. It wasn't just what they did, it was how casual they were about doing it. I waited until everyone had returned from their walk around the property. Most of them had gone down to the dock for pictures. A few lingered in the living room, sipping cocktails and scrolling through their phones. I stood in the center of the room and spoke in the same voice I used when I pitched designs to skeptical clients. Calm, measured, but not asking for permission. "I want to make something clear," I said. They turned slowly, drinks in hand, eyes adjusting to the change in tone. "This weekend, it will be the last time anyone arrives here without an invitation. Next time, the gate will be locked. If I want company, I'll ask. If not, I won't." There was a pause. Claudine looked mildly amused. Trevor shifted on the couch. Isolde's smile froze. Dorian said nothing, just sipped his drink and avoided my gaze. Isolde stepped forward, her tone still sugar-coated. "Of course, no one meant to overstep. We just assumed—" I held up a hand. "That's the problem. You all assumed that I'd roll over, that I'd host without consent, that I'd keep quiet because I always have." Another silence, thicker this time. I turned and walked out the front door, letting it close behind me. That evening, I sat alone on the porch, a blanket over my legs, a glass of red wine in hand. The stars were starting to appear, small at first, then bold. From inside the house, I could hear faint music and the sound of someone laughing a little too loudly. Isolde's laugh, always needing to be heard. She knew then that I wasn't bluffing, but she also knew she wasn't done. The stillness in the house that morning wasn't the kind that follows peace. It was the quiet that arrives when everyone's pretending too hard. After I'd drawn my line the day before, I noticed the shift. Conversations paused when I entered a room. Jokes didn't land the same. Claudine stuck to compliments so hollow they echoed. But Isolde, she doubled down. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen was buzzing with her voice and her agenda. She announced a dinner she had planned, as though the home she stood in were simply a venue. She called it a thank you gathering for the guests, the ones she invited, the ones she never asked me about. I was sitting on the back porch with a book I wasn't really reading when I heard the screen door swing open behind me. "Hey," she said, her voice syrupy and loud enough for those inside to hear. "Just a heads up. Dinner's at 7. Don't worry, I've got it all covered." She didn't look at me. She never looked at me when she was performing. "Great," I replied, not lifting my eyes. "Thanks for the update." She lingered a moment, waiting for a reaction. When I gave her none, she slipped back inside. Around 4 o'clock, I walked into the kitchen to get some water and found an envelope sitting on the counter next to a stack of wine glasses. It wasn't sealed, and the handwriting on the front wasn't mine. Curious, I slid it open and pulled out the contents. My stomach tightened. It was a signed contract, a rental agreement between Isolde's PR firm and an events management company. The subject line read, "Venue, Greenwood Lake Retreat, Weekend Wellness Series." The dates were for next month. My name was nowhere. The house address was listed. The deposit was already paid. She was renting out my home, without asking, without even telling me, using her business name. I sat down at the table, the pages in my hand shaking slightly. Not from nerves, from something more focused, sharper. I didn't yell. I didn't storm upstairs to confront her. I walked to my printer in the office and pulled out my file drawer. 5 minutes later, I had what I needed: the original deed, my signature, the official property title, sole ownership, clear, legal, final. I placed it neatly into a folder and set it beside my dinner plate. By 7, the guests had gathered in the dining room. Isolde stood near the head of the table, arranging place settings like she'd earned the right to host. Claudine floated nearby, offering compliments that felt more like cues. When everyone had found a seat, Claudine clinked her glass with a spoon. "I just want to say," she began, "how proud I am of Isolde for pulling this all together. This home, this weekend. It's been beautiful." There were murmurs of agreement. Glasses lifted. Isolde smiled graciously, like she'd just won an award. "Thank you, Mom," she said, touching her chest with faux humility. "This home has always been about vision and togetherness. I'm just glad I could help bring people together here." She looked around the table as if to capture the moment in her mind. That's when I stood up, slow and steady. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I reached for the folder beside my plate, opened it, and slid the documents onto the center of the table. The chatter quieted immediately. "What's this?" Isolde asked, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. I looked at the guests, then at her. "Just so there's no confusion," I said, "this home belongs solely to me. It's not available for rental. It's not part of a partnership. It's mine. The deed, the title, the mortgage, all in my name." The silence was loud. Forks hovered mid-air. Claudine's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Trevor coughed into his napkin. Someone across the table muttered, "Well, that's clear." Isolde didn't speak. She stared at the papers like they had betrayed her. "I'd appreciate it," I continued, "if no one makes decisions about this place without consulting me. That includes contracts, event bookings, or family assumptions." I sat back down. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. I had rehearsed this moment in my head for years. Not this exact scene, but the feeling of finally being visible. No one clapped. No one needed to. After dinner, people left the table quicker than usual. The dock suddenly became more attractive. The living room emptied faster than it had all week. Claudine didn't say much. Dorian avoided eye contact altogether. Isolde, to her credit, cleared the plates with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, I made tea and stepped onto the porch. The stars were out, casting a dim glow over the lake. I sipped slowly, letting the silence settle. This time, the quiet didn't ache. It didn't demand anything from me. It simply existed, like I did. Fully, finally, in my own space. Not to prove anything, just to be seen. The tension didn't dissolve after dinner. It thickened. Even as the last wineglass was rinsed and stacked beside the sink, I could feel the walls absorbing what nobody was brave enough to say out loud. Claudine barely spoke. Dorian, as usual, disappeared early, pretending to scroll through emails he never replied to. Guests tiptoed around me, as if I had turned from background decor into a fragile wire they might trip. But Isolde, she didn't retreat, she retaliated. By early morning, I saw her move through the kitchen like nothing had happened. She wore the same white linen as the first day she arrived, her hair perfectly pinned, her smile almost venomously polite. I had just returned from a short walk around the lake. No earbuds, no distractions, just steps. Breathing. Recalibrating. I made my way into the kitchen for coffee and caught a glimpse of her phone screen. Her Instagram story was still open. The caption above a filtered photo of the dinner table read, "Families go through ups and downs. What matters is grace." Some people forget that. I didn't need to guess who she meant. The comments rolled in, rapid and familiar. "You're the glue, girl. Your family is so lucky to have you. You always carry things with such elegance." I stood behind her for a second longer than she realized. Then, when she finally noticed, she quickly closed the app, giving me that smile she reserved for the press. Rehearsed, polished, hollow. I didn't say a word, but I screenshotted the post later in my room. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to remember exactly how it looked before it all fell apart. Around noon, I opened my tablet to check the weather for the week, a routine more than anything, when I saw it. Someone had tagged the lake house in a group photo from last night's dinner. I clicked it open, instinctively. There they were, all of them. Dorian, Claudine, the guests, even Mira holding up a glass of ginger ale like she was part of a grown-up toast. I was missing. No cropping error, no angle trick, just gone. I scrolled down and found another version, posted by someone else. This time, I was barely visible. Blurred in the background, mid-step, my face turned away. The caption, "Incredible family weekend at Isolde's lake place." I didn't comment, didn't correct. That afternoon, just before lunch, a woman I hadn't spoken to before, one of Isolde's PR colleagues maybe, approached me in the hallway with a casserole dish. "Hi there, could you take this into the kitchen for me?" she asked, smiling, already handing it off. "We were told you manage things here." My fingers touched the glass before I stopped myself. "I do," I said evenly, "because I own the house." She blinked, confused. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought—" I smiled, polite but unmistakable. "Sure, and when I'm done, I'll return to the owner's seat." The silence was instant. She turned red. Isolde, watching from the dining room doorway, rolled her eyes. "Let's not be dramatic, Sib," she said, a little too loud. I turned and walked away. That evening, after the last of the dessert plates were cleared and the kids had been corralled outside for games, I found her in the den. Isolde was sitting with her laptop, sipping a glass of wine, legs crossed like she was running a board meeting. She didn't look up when I entered, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch, the kind of smirk she wore when she thought she'd won something. "We need to talk," I said. She closed her laptop slowly, finally giving me her full attention. "If this is another monologue about boundaries, Sibel—" "It's not," I interrupted. "It's a warning." She leaned back. "Is that a threat now?" "No," I said. "But the next time you take my name out of something that belongs to me, the next time you tell a story that cuts me out of it, I won't just hand you a deed. I'll hand you a removal notice. And you won't be invited back." She opened her mouth, probably to toss out some sarcastic remark, but nothing came. "You've rewritten our family's history in your favor for years," I continued. "You've called it grace. I call it erasure. And I'm done being quiet about it." Her face shifted, slightly, enough that I saw the crack. "You're overreacting," she muttered. "You always were the emotional one." "And you," I said, stepping back toward the door, "always needed an audience. But this isn't your stage anymore." I left the room before she could find her words. That night, the laughter on the patio didn't last long. People filtered in and out like they were on unstable ground. Even the wine didn't seem to taste the same. Dorian passed me on the stairs. He didn't say anything, just gave a small nod. Maybe that was his version of choosing a side. Maybe it was just guilt. I didn't care either way. That was the moment I knew. She'd either leave quietly, or I'd make sure she did. The air the next morning carried a weight that felt unusual, as if the lake itself had chosen silence as a deliberate act of witness. The water was glassy, not a ripple breaking its surface, and the clouds hung low, heavy but still. Even the trees seemed hushed, as if they too were waiting for something to unfold. Breakfast passed in a strange rhythm. Forks touched plates, knives scraped faintly against toast, and the coffee pot emptied cup by cup. But no conversation rose to meet the sounds. The atmosphere was taut, thick with the unspoken. No one dared mention the deed I had placed on the table the night before, the one that had made every face pale, every throat tighten. No one acknowledged the contract Isolde had attempted to sneak across to me, as though by ignoring it they could undo the insult. They all acted as though silence could erase it, as if omission could become absolution. But silence does not erase, it amplifies. By mid-morning, the walls of the house felt too close, the air too heavy with words unsaid. I slipped out the back door and followed the long stone path that wound toward the water. Each step against the damp stone felt like a small reclaiming. The lake spread wide before me when I reached the railing, a silver sheet beneath the gray sky. I leaned forward, pressing my hands into the wood, letting the quiet of the lake steady me. From the far end of the dock, I caught voices, low, hushed, but intentionally pitched to Carrie. Two guests, a couple whose names I had barely learned, stood together, their backs half turned, speaking in the way people do when they want to be overheard but pretend otherwise. "She doesn't even have anyone," the woman said, with a tone I recognized too well, not pity, but dismissal. "No partner, no kids, just a house." The man gave a soft, mocking laugh. "She acts like this is her empire." As if building walls and filling them with furniture means she's actually built a life. Their words hit me harder than they should have, because I had heard versions of that same judgment my entire adult life. From friends who didn't understand why I hadn't settled into the neat boxes they had. From extended family who measured worth in spouses and children. From men I had once loved, who thought I would be more palatable if I leaned on them, if I shrank so they could shine brighter. But here, in my own home, my sanctuary, the place I had fought for, the place I had reclaimed, it cut differently. They had walked through my doors, eaten at my table, stood beneath my roof, and still, they could reduce me to nothing more than a checklist I hadn't completed. I didn't flinch. I didn't give them the satisfaction of my reaction. I turned, walked back up the stone path, and entered the house. No tears, just clarity. By noon, I was seated at the kitchen counter, laptop open in front of me. My fingers hovered above the keys for only a moment before they found their rhythm. The subject line appeared crisp and undeniable. Official invitation, Greenwood Lake House Retreat. The body of the email was short, firm, deliberate. Going forward, access to this home will be by invitation only. I will be hosting a formal reopening next month. If you wish to attend, kindly RSVP by replying to this email. Attached, you'll find the full deed of ownership and a photograph of the property, as it was intended. Mine. I attached the image I had taken the week I moved in. No filters, no staging, just me barefoot on the porch, jeans rolled at the ankle, a mug of coffee cradled in my hands. The lake stretching behind me, the porch beams framing me, my name embossed at the corner of the image. Not a borrowed family, not borrowed glory, just mine. I collected every address I could from Isolde's previous group threads, pasted them into the recipient's line, and hit send. The message left me lighter. When I stepped back into the living room, I found Claudine by the fireplace. A book lay open in her lap, but she hadn't turned a page. Her gaze flicked up when I entered. "Can I say something to you?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years. I lowered myself into the chair across from her, angled just slightly so we weren't face to face, but close enough to bridge the distance. "You've always been so careful," she said after a pause. "So measured. That's something I admired, even if I didn't say it." I waited, giving her room. She exhaled, long and uneven. "But I let your sister get away with too much, because it was easier, because she was louder, because she made manipulation look like leadership." I told myself I wasn't picking sides. "You did," I said softly. "You just never admitted it." She did not argue. Her eyes flickered down at the book, then back to me. "I raised you both," she whispered, "but only one of you respected what didn't belong to her." The words landed heavy, like ash suspended in air, refusing to settle. "I'm sorry, Sibel," she said finally, her voice breaking at the edges. "I should have protected your place, not questioned it." I nodded once. It didn't erase the years of silence or the way doubt had been planted in me again and again, but it was something. One acknowledgement, one fracture in the script that had been rehearsed too long. That afternoon, I didn't prepare a speech or call everyone together. I didn't craft some grand performance. I simply walked to the front door, pulled it open, and turned around. The room stilled. The sound of conversation faltered, the hum of glasses and low laughter tapering into quiet. Isolde stood near the bar cart, her hand wrapped around a second drink she didn't need. She froze when she saw me. "You arrived uninvited," I said evenly. My voice was calm, steady. "You took what wasn't yours, and now you leave." No dramatics, no shouting, just truth, unvarnished. Isolde's hand trembled around the glass. For the first time in years, she had no retort ready, no sarcasm, no sharpness, no quick defense, just silence. Claudine rose slowly, sliding her book into her purse as though she had been waiting for this moment. "I'll walk with you," she said to Isolde. Still no response. Dorian appeared in the doorway, his eyes moving quickly across the scene, taking in the weight of it. He stepped beside Claudine, his expression guarded. "I'll walk Mom out," he said, his voice clipped. Isolde's heels struck the floor with exaggerated sharpness as she crossed the room. She passed me without looking, the scent of her perfume lingering like a shadow. Claudine offered me a faint smile, weary, restrained, but stripped of condescension. Just human. The door shut behind them with a sound that echoed through the house, and just like that, it was mine again. But the silence they left behind was different this time. Not sharp, not suffocating. New. Mine. After they left, the house did not sigh in relief. It did not collapse into emptiness, nor did it ring with loneliness. What it held was something deeper, something truer than absence. Presence. My presence. For the first time since I could remember, these walls were not filled with other people's noise, accusations, interruptions, corrections, expectations. The house no longer pressed against me like a costume that didn't fit. It simply breathed with me. It just was. And for once, that was enough. The days that followed unfolded like chapters in a quieter, slower book, written only for me. Mornings began with intention rather than obligation. I folded linens not because I was preparing for company, but because I liked the crisp edges and the smell of lavender detergent. I brewed coffee and drank it while it was still hot, sitting by the wide window that faced the lake. I wasn't gulping it down in between interruptions or while waiting for the next demand. I was savoring it, one sip at a time, in peace. The living room remained orderly, exactly the way I left it. The couch cushions didn't shift out of place. The hallway echoed only my footsteps, and for the first time, those footsteps sounded like they belonged, like the house was listening, acknowledging, confirming that I was here and that I mattered. The silence was no longer sharp, no longer cutting. It was soft now, soft and deliberate, like a quilt stitched together from scraps of survival. This silence wasn't punishment, it was earned. That weekend, I walked the halls with a kind of reverence, pausing at certain corners where arguments had once flared, where dismissive words had landed like blows, where voices had tried to edit and erase my truth. I touched the walls lightly as if to test their memory. And yet, there I was, standing in the very space that had once shrunk me, no longer bending to fit the role they had shoved into my hands, still here, still whole. One afternoon, I opened the mailbox, expecting the usual flood of catalogs, bills, and supermarket coupons. Instead, nestled in between the routine paper was a small cream-colored envelope. Unmarked, no return address, no label, but my heart tightened as soon as I saw the handwriting. I knew it instantly. Dorian, my brother. Inside was a single photograph. Me and our father, taken when I must have been around 12. We were standing on jagged rocks by the lake, the same lake that stretched just beyond the porch I now sat on each morning. I was holding a sketchbook, clinging to it like a secret treasure. He had one arm wrapped around my shoulders. We were both smiling. A real smile, not the ones we performed for others. Behind the photo was a note, folded neatly. Dorian's handwriting had that same spare elegance our father's did. Measured, clean, without excess. The note was only 2 lines. "I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." He'd be proud of what you built. It wasn't an apology for everything. It didn't mend the fractures or erase the silence that had stretched between us for years, but it was something, and in its quiet way, it mattered. Later that same day, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Trevor, the guest who had once mistaken my quiet for invisibility, who had taken a photograph that reduced me to a shadow in my own story. The message was short. "Wanted to send you this. Sorry about the photo from before." Attached was a new image. Just me, standing alone on the dock. The lake shimmered behind me, and above, the sky stretched wide and limitless. I wasn't hunched. I wasn't fading into the background. I was upright, facing forward, eyes steady. Strong. Beneath the photo, his caption read, "True ownership needs no announcement." I stared at it for a long time before saving it to my desktop. This was what reclamation looked like. That night, I opened my laptop and returned to the project I had been quietly nurturing for months, a platform with no frills, no marketing team, no polished slogans crafted by people who didn't understand. Just a clean design, a safe space for women like me. Women who had been edited out of their own histories, who had been told their voices were too small, too loud, too inconvenient. I gave it a name: Women Who Reclaim. On the homepage, beneath the title, I added a tagline that had been whispering in my chest for weeks. For the ones who never shouted but always stayed. For the ones they called dramatic. Until the silence spoke louder. I clicked publish. The screen refreshed, the site live now, breathing its own quiet truth into the world. Then I closed the laptop, lit a small candle on the porch, and sat there as the evening settled in around me. No occasion, no audience, no guests. Just me, the scent of cedar and lemon balm drifting in the breeze, the flame flickering like a companion. I wasn't bitter. I had no illusions that bitterness could carry me anywhere worth going. But I wasn't naive either. I knew peace came with edges. It had to. Otherwise, people mistook it for passivity, for submission, for an open door they could walk through whenever they pleased. Peace without boundaries wasn't peace at all. It was surrender, and I had surrendered enough. As night thickened, stars began to blink into view one by one, and I whispered aloud the words no one had ever gifted me in their entirety. You were always enough. The words felt foreign on my tongue, as if they belonged to another language I was only just beginning to learn. But as I said them again, softer, steadier, they began to root themselves inside me. And in that moment, under the wide expanse of sky, I felt what I had denied myself for decades: free. Because some stories do not end in reconciliation, they do not tie themselves up with apologies or family portraits remade. Some stories end in reclamation, and that, I finally understood, is more than enough. Some stories don't need dramatic endings, just quiet truth. This wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, dignity, and reclaiming what was mine all along. Maybe you've been the quiet one too. Overlooked, underestimated, told to stay in your place. So let me ask you, when was the last time you chose yourself, even when it meant standing alone? If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories every week.